Hi y'all, and welcome again to the Immigrant Mother in Europe YouTube channel. My name is Yaira Tay Thompson and I am happy to welcome you to my channel again. Before we go any further, please remember as usual to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you always know when there's a new episode uploaded. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about grandparent nannies. What does that even mean, grandparent nannies? Well, grandparent nannies are basically your parents or your parents-in-law who help you take care of your children, whether it's full-time or part-time. Now, I know that the relationship dynamics between everyone and their parents or their parents-in-laws is different when you go from one relationship to another. For example, with me in particular, I don't really have any relationship with my in-laws because they are sadly not alive anymore. But I have a great relationship with my parents, and my mom is amazing and hands-on with my kids whenever she's around us. She comes to visit for 3 months, usually timed appropriately right before the birth. She usually gets in right before the birth of the baby and stays for 3 months to help me with the first 3 months of being a mother, or a mother again in the case of my second son. And she's very hands-on. She helps with laundry, groceries, cooking, everything, so that I could just relax. And whenever we find ourselves in Ghana at the same time, she totally helps me take care of my boys so that I could go out alone without having to worry about juggling them in the heat and the discomfort and the long days that I sometimes have to keep chasing one thing or another. Now, the relationship dynamics between grandparents and their grandkids is a special thing, okay? Very rarely do you see grandparents being really hard on their grandkids. Very, very rarely, because it's like they raise, especially if they raise their children by themselves, without staying away from their children. I come from a culture where it's not really rare to find a parent leaving their children with their parents, so the child with the grandparents, to be raised by the grandparents for a while so that the parents can have a little freedom to concentrate on work and earning a living to take care of the kid, for an example. But when your parents raised you by themselves, it's like you are the trial run. They make all their mistakes with you, and then when you have your kids and they get to watch their grandchildren, they are soft and doting and indulging and basically like the aunt or the godmom. They spoil the kids and then send the kids back to you, the parents, to do all like the mean disciplining parents. Yeah, that is usually what I have noticed to be the relationship between grandparents and grandchildren. It's an amazing thing to watch. It's lovely when you see the grandparents are so hands-on and so indulgent with their grandkids, but then it also makes you feel like, where was this when I was growing up and I wanted you to give me all the candy and I wanted you to not scold me, and I never got that, some people might say. But then on the other hand, then your kids never really understand when they grow up and you're telling them stories about your childhood and they're like, but grandma is so nice, grandma never shouts on me, grandma's never hit me. If you come from a culture where hitting is allowed like I do, thankfully my mom never hit me, my grandma never hit me, yelled at me, never hit me. But it's very hard for your children to reconcile the image that you portray of your parents when you were growing up with who they've gotten to know as they are growing up, because that's not the same image that they have. Talking about grandparent nannies, You also have to then start thinking about how to deal with overbearing parents and overbearing parents-in-laws. There are situations, sometimes even not from our parents, where people think that what they know is better for your kids than you, the person raising your kids, and they're always full of unsolicited advice. When and how do you draw boundaries? When do you say, no, I'm not listening to you, I'm doing this my way, even though I'm a first-time mom or I'm a new mom, or I'm not going to listen to your way, without coming across as being rude? And that's a big thing when you are African. You can't really talk back to older people because they take it as you being disrespectful or being rude. It's considered, for example, rude to say, no thank you, I'm not going to take your advice on how to handle ABC with my child, and I want to do it my own way. So we get into the habit of just saying, yes ma'am, no ma'am, thank you ma'am, even though we really want to tell them, can you mind your own business and let me raise my child the way I find fit? And so we need to learn when and how and in what ways to draw boundaries when it comes to our children, so that we don't keep them away from well-meaning grandparents, but at the same time we don't sour our relationship with our parents or our parents-in-laws and damage something that might in some situations already be fragile, you know. Now, as with everything, there are pros and cons that come with having grandparent nannies. Now, the very first one is that your children and their grandparents build and grow such an inseparable bond that is amazing to watch. It's something that I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. It warms my heart whenever my son randomly, without any prompting, asks about his momo, which is the Danish word for maternal grandmother. It's like, when is she coming to visit? Or when is she going to be in Ghana when we're in Ghana? Or do we get to go to the USA? Why is she in the USA? Why doesn't she live in Denmark? It warms my heart when he starts up the conversations without me prompting him or without me bringing it up. And it tells you how much of a bond that they create, whether they're always around them or not. And it's something I think we all want. I don't think there's anybody who does not want their children to have a relationship with their parents, you know. Now, grandparents also have a vested interest in their grandchildren's development and safety. Now, as a family member in general and as a grandparent, you want your child to thrive. Your grandchild, to thrive. You don't want anything negative associated with them, and that's understandable. And that's something that you wouldn't get from a nanny that you're paying up the street. There's some of them that are just in there for the paycheck. There's some who have a passion for the job, yes, but then their passion might not go as far as wanting the very best in life for your child. Yes, they want your child to do well, but maybe not like the very best in life, you know. So that's one amazing thing about having a grandparent be a nanny to your child. They are very vested, and this is such an irreplaceable commodity to have. Now, the third pro that I can think about is that there are known commodities in your life and in your children's life. Your children know them, you know how they parent, you know their quirks, you know what they're going to listen to, you know how to handle them and how to manipulate them. You know when you tell them to follow this meal plan, for example, you know when they are not going to do it or when they are going to do it, so you know how to adjust it and manipulate it so that it works in your favor and in your child's favor. Because yes, we know that they always want what's best for us and what's best for our kids, but sometimes they also think, well, not sometimes, all the time, they always think they know better than us because they raised us and now they're helping us raise our children. So it's nice when you have a pulse on the person because you've had many years with them, so you know how to handle the situation, as opposed to an outsider where you wouldn't know how to get them to do something when you are not in the picture or you are not at home at the particular moment. Now the fourth pro that I'm gonna come to is about a multicultural upbringing, and this is something that is typical in my life. For example, because I am Ghanaian, married to a Dane, I speak English with my boys when I remember, because I'm in such an environment where Danish is the daily language, and my husband speaks Danish to the boys, they speak Danish in school and all of that. And it comes to the point where when we get around family and around my mom, they get to hear my mom speak Ewe. They get to experience a whole different culture. They get to hear words and phrases that they can use and repeat and learn how things are done in a whole different culture, and it opens up their horizons, and it's something that I couldn't even give them if I wanted to, because it already had enough juggling trying to teach a 4-year-old how to speak English in a culture that is totally Danish with no room for other cultures, because it's a small country with a small population size comparatively to what I'm used to. So introducing him to just 2 languages is hard enough, and dealing with the code switch and him knowing who he speaks what to is challenging enough without having to introduce the 3rd and the 4th and the 5th and how many other languages. So it's amazing when you have grandparent nannies, because then they get to do that for you. And a visible example is when my mom is over, my son never even attempts to speak Danish with her. It's like he knows inherently that she doesn't live here, so she doesn't speak the language. He speaks English with her throughout. He can be mid-sentence with me in Danish and switch to my mom and immediately switch to English. His language and code switching is amazing for his age, that I am so impressed, and it so helps when you have that influence from your parents, that your children just automatically, without you doing all the heavy lifting, are multicultural and multilingual. So now we're going to talk about some cons about having grandparents nannies, grandparents as nannies. The first one is burnout. When I talk about burnout, I'm referring to a burnout in the relationship between the grandparents and their own kids, okay? Sometimes, especially when you have parents who are very selfless and very giving, you as the child of your parents, you can cross the line several times without knowing that you have crossed their boundaries, and because they're so selfless and giving, they don't verbalize it until it's happened too many times and it's gone too far, and then they snap at you, and then that sometimes crosses over to affect the grandkids. So one major con that I can point out is burnout. The next one is tension, especially if you don't have a good relationship with your parents or with your parents-in-laws. Whenever you have to get them to watch your kids for you, or if because you're left with no option, they have to do it for you full time, and the relationship isn't great, you end up realizing that there's so much tension between the two of you because you don't get along, and then it feels like they're doing a favor for you, and then they're doing things their own way and are not listening to how you want things to be done because they think they know better than you, and that already affects a relationship that already has so much strain on it to create even more tension than you're used to, and that is not really a great environment for raising a child, I don't think. final con that I can think about is normalcy. There are some grandparents who are extra. They can't be grandparents in the traditional sense of the word and just give the kids candy or watch the kids, or you know, they have to be totally extra, and when the parents are out of the house have, you know, impromptu at home photo shoots or introduce the kids to virgin cocktails and spa days, and you know, I mean, we're going off the radar here, but there are some grandparents who are super extra, and sometimes it affects the dynamics in the home and also the environment the child is in when they can't have that traditional grandparent grandkid relationship or environment, because then when their friends are even talking about things like that, they cannot relate, you know. So there's that as well, and those are the things I can think about off the top of my head about grandparent nannies. All in all, I think it's like the most wonderful concept, especially if you are in a situation where you can't afford other childcare options. If you stayed with me this hour and watched through this whole vlog, I am glad that you at least have heard or learned or been reintroduced the concept of grandparent nannies. Please don't forget to follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. The name is the same, Immigrant Mother in Europe. You can also look up my website, www.immigrantmotherineurope.com. Please go there, subscribe there, and check out the shop. There's always stuff in there for your toddlers. They're free printables that you can definitely use at home, no matter what size, age, littles you have. My name, as usual, is Yairate Thompson. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell. And until the next video, it's love, it's light, as always.